Lee Harvey Oswald was not the only Marine that went to Russia and posed as a defector. Believe it or not, there were others. That was a program. That program was run by, drum roll please, the Directorship of Counterintelligence. And the man behind that office is James Jesus Angleton. Now, very recently, let's see if I can find the name. They declassified something. And you may have noticed it. It was a minor item. The CIA had been reading Lee Harvey Oswald's letters. Do you remember when that became public? But relatively recently, a couple of years ago. They had kept that. They had kept that. So that obviously, the CIA, if you're reading someone's letters, you must know they exist, right? Is that sort of, we have to just do that basic logic here because apparently the news media can't do it.
People also don't, just a quick interject, people also don't know that Oswald was traveling to Mexico City. Like there's just different things that.
Well, let me go off the track and go up on Mexico City, right? So the CIA has stations all over the world. If you're the head of a station, you're a station chief. Mexico City, people don't realize this. It's a little bit like Beirut, it's like it's a nest of spies. It's like a free fire zone for spies, right? Assassins are trained down there. So the station chief for Mexico City is a big deal, and that station supervises the entire of Latin America, so it's a big deal. The guy that was down there as station chief didn't like found something fishy about the Kennedy assassination. He mostly kept it to himself, but he occasionally talked to people about it, and he was writing a memoir. When that man died, the director of counterintelligence, James Jesus Angleton, personally got on a plane, went down to Mexico City, and browbeat his wife, the dead man's wife, into giving him all the copies of the memoir and allowing him free run of his library, and they carted everything out on a military jet. So James Jesus Angleton's job was to cover things up. And decades, this is more than a decade later after Kennedy's assassination, he was still on the job. And it was so important to him to make sure that this guy down in Mexico City hadn't left any loose ends, that he got on a plane and personally did it. But let's talk about the guy that was reading Oswald's letters. Why wouldn't they tell us his name? That was kept a secret until just a couple of years ago. What's the big deal? His name was Reuben Efron. Reuben Efron was a guy posing as a trade attorney, an expert in trade, based in Tel Aviv, flying back and forth between Washington, D.C. and Tel Aviv on a regular basis. He worked for the CIA. And when Oswald's wife was being interrogated by the commission, I forget what, it's a very famous commission, I can't think of the name.
The Warren Commission.
James Jesus Angleton had Efron sit in the room and watch the interrogation. Okay, so there are, by the way, so there's so many things to this. There are not one but two memorials to James Jesus Angleton in Israel. Okay, so here we have the man who's responsible for the CIA secrets. All right, he was helping the Israelis steal nuclear material from essentially from the U.S. Navy. I mean, a crime, treason. He was up to here in the MK Ultra program, and he was very active in the cover-up of the assassination of John F. Kennedy. So, I ask everybody this question who's read 1,000,001 conspiracy books as I did and listened to 1,000,001 conspiracy podcasts. How many times does James Jesus Angleton's name come up? Yeah.
Never.
And could that be because Arnon Milchan made sure the JFK movie went in a certain direction? Could that be? Now, here's some other weird stuff. We had the Church Committee. You know the Church Committee? That was back in the 70s. They were showing the connection between organized crime and the CIA, and the fact that they collaborated on the attempt to assassinate Fidel Castro. Okay, they brought in every Italian mafia guy that you could find. One guy was left alone. Meyer Lansky. Okay. Now, who's Meyer Lansky?
Now that I know because I'm a Jew from Miami.
Yeah, there you go. So for people that don't know, Meyer Lansky along with Lucky Luciano, they are the guys that put organized into organized crime. Okay. Before that, it was a free for all. Hey, I'll steal from you. I'll hijack your beer truck. I'll do this. I'll do that. And Lansky and Luciano said, guys, let's chill out. They had a meeting in Atlantic City and they said, okay, you get Boston, you get Providence, you get Detroit, if you don't cross each other's lines. Now, here's where it really gets interesting. If you cross each other's lines, we have something called Murder Incorporated, which a lot of people have heard of. And they think, oh, that's like 3 guys that used to kill people. No, that was a nationwide network of hitmen. And hitmen is just another word for assassin. It's just a linguistic sleight of hand. They're assassins, and they're really good. The other nickname for assassins or for hitmen is mechanic, because it's a skilled trade. You've got to do surveillance. You've got to you got to know where to catch the guy, where to hide, how to get away. There's a lot to know. So Meyer Lansky had, along with Lucky Luciano, a national network of hitmen. So if somebody misbehaved in Cleveland, they could call somebody from LA to come in and take care of that person for misbehaving. And they had a thing called the commission. We all get together, hash things out. There's a lot of talk that the mob killed Kennedy. Do you think that the mob would have killed Kennedy without holding a commission meeting? Do you think it was just like, they just say, oh, you kind of want to kill him. Let's just kill him. No. At that level, they would have had a meeting. Who would have been in that meeting? Well, all the major heads of the crime families and Meyer Lansky. But they never mentioned Meyer. His name rarely comes up as, and when they had the church committee meeting, I think I mentioned earlier, he was never called. Even when they had the Kefauver committee, which was a thing that happened in the 50s, it was similar. They went from city to city. They had these live TV hearings and they exposed organized crime. Somehow, Meyer Lansky was never asked to come. Meyer Lansky got involved in a big problem with the IRS. It was sort of like an Al Capone situation. It's like, well, we can't get you for all the crimes you've done, but we can get you for all this money you didn't pay taxes on. At that point, he disappeared to the country of Israel. And he stayed there until he was able to pay off wherever he had to pay off. He was there for a couple of years. And then he came back to his favorite place on earth, Miami, and spent the rest of his life. He was also involved in providing arms illegally to Zionists during the World War II era. He also was involved. Lucky Luciano got pinched, was in jail, and Meyer Lansky knocked on the door of OSS, the forerunner of the CIA, and said, guys, listen, we control the docks. We could do so many good things for you, but you got to cut a break. You got to cut my friend Lucky a break. That was the beginning of the alliance between organized crime and intelligence. So James Jesus Angleton would have been very familiar with Meyer Lansky. The other piece of Meyer Lansky, which is really important to know, is they always called him the mob's accountant. Have you ever heard that? Or yes. The mob's banker. Oh, it's just, he just sat there and counted the numbers. Now you have to understand, like, crime is relatively easy, if you're dedicated to it, right? And you remember, did you ever see that thing from Breaking Bad when they had this pallet of $100 bills in a storage unit and they're like, what do we do with this thing? Okay. That becomes the ultimate problem of organized crime. And Al Capone went to jail for it. He spent the rest of his life in prison because the IRS got him. Meyer Lansky was the money launderer for the entire U.S. mafia. So all these Italian guys, and I'm half Italian, were running around, knocking themselves out, stealing all this money, piling it up. Meyer Lansky was the guy that helped them make it disappear. That's what it means when they say he's the mob's banker. And the business that they were in was heroin. Heroin has always been a very lucrative business. You make it for a penny and you sell it for $1, and it's addictive. That got him involved in overseas stuff, obviously, because think about this. You always see, hey, they just seized 10 tons of cocaine on a ship. You got to step back and go, wow, who bought that cocaine on the other side? That must have been expensive. Who chartered that ship? Ships that size aren't cheap. Who got the crew together? That must have cost money. That's a banking function. And that's what Meyer Lansky did. Right? So he would have known when they say there was a collaboration between the CIA and organized crime. He would have been one of the people that had to have been helping, because he knew all the assassins. He knew how to launder money. He knew how to bring in foreign people. And apparently, there were Corsicans involved in the assassination, and Corsicans were used to be very active and may still be in the heroin trade. So anyway, long story short, everybody deeply involved in the assassination, in my opinion, from what I can see. Here's how I look at it. You're in a room with 10 dogs. The lights go out. A dog bites you. The lights go back on. You don't know which dog it was. How do you know? There's no eyewitness. There's no camera. You just measure the bite on your leg, and you measure the jaws of the 10 dogs. The jaw that fits is the dog that bit you.
Right.
There was really only one guy that could have managed the assassination and the cover up, which is all committing a crime, very easy. Covering up a crime, difficult. Covering up a crime at that level, world-class skill involved. Who had the world-class skill? Our friend, James Jesus Angleton, director of counterintelligence. So it just so happens that the two of the guys that somehow have been kept out of the limelight, who had all the skills in the world necessary to kill Kennedy and cover it up, happen to be Zionists. They just happen to be. I don't think they did it for Israel, but they just happen to be Zionists. So that's kind of interesting information.
Yeah. So you're not saying it was like necessarily a Mossad situation as much as it was protecting what Israel was doing.
All right,
Here's the other crazy thing. Pardon me to interrupt. Who founded the Mossad? CIA. The CIA. Who trained the Mossad? The CIA. Who was one of their chief trainers? James Jesus Angleton.
Okay, so it's the same thing.
Yeah, and by the way, he probably was an anti-Semite. He was a total waspy guy, went to Yale, had all those attitudes. But part of the attitude was, let's put some headbangers in the Middle East that belong to us, so that when we need something, we can push a button and they'll go kill for us. I don't think it's any more complicated than that. That's the role of Israel in the world and with the U.S.
Part of the reason I think that Israel did organize and ultimately execute the assassination of JFK and RFK is because RFK Jr. refuses to scrutinize them in any way whatsoever, including his very unhealthy relationship with Rabbi Shmuley in such a context where it just doesn't make any sense. Like, it makes no sense. The most important part of your book comes in the latter part of the second third of the book, when you're talking about what is going on regarding the testimony from Senate Foreign Relations Committee hearings in the summer of 1963, leading up to just a couple of weeks prior to Jack's assassination. The Jewish Agency for Israel Incorporated and the Jewish Agency American Section Incorporated made payments to the American Zionist organization, that is what ultimately became AIPAC.
That was AIPAC, yeah.
Which formed a substantial portion of the total budget of the organization. This is in 1961, 1962, and we're talking $5 million a year, which translated today is probably north of, I don't know, $15, $20 million, maybe more. The AZC constituted an agent of the Jewish Agency in Jerusalem under Section 1C2 of the Foreign Agents Registration Act. If such registration is not forthcoming, appropriate action should be taken to enforce such requests. As the letter from Assistant AG Yeagley wrote a month before Jack's assassination, attorneys for the American Zionist Council pleaded for not being required to register as foreign agents. It would eventually destroy the Zionist movement. In addition to that, April 1965, the Department of Justice accepts the American Zionist Council request to not be required to register as a foreign agent. November 1967, under the direction of President Johnson, AIPAC applies for a federal tax exemption. The U.S. Department of Treasury grants it, and it is backdated all the way to 1954. This is all about money and power. It just so happens to be cloaked in religious bullshit.
For real. I mean, it's make believe. That Zionism is Jewish is a make believe construct.
Completely.
It's Disneyland. It's a sinister Disneyland.
And the most sinister thing that you point out in this book about midway through, which just goes to show you that the only people who are truly interested, and I always like to point out somebody like Emily Austin. I'm sure you know who she is. Mm-hmm. This is a person who I met her, and I thought that she was a lot older than she was. I thought she was in her 30s. She was 20 when I met her. And this is a person who is so connected into the Mossad, into everything. And where did I meet her? I met her at JFK's, JFK. It's amazing, the slip of the tongue, at RFK Jr.'s campaign launch in Philadelphia in October of 23. So this is right after what happened. Little did I know what it means to be in the upper echelons of society. Talk about somebody who's really connected. The higher up the ladder you go. The Zionist project is an elitist project if there ever was. It's the ultimate elitist project. And the thing that you point out in this book, which I thought was probably the most disturbing thing, when you talk about money and power, you talk about the lunacy of what the Zionist project wants Trump to do now, whether it's bargaining for Greenland.
Did you see he wants to change it to red, white, and blue land?
Listen, we've already changed it to the Gulf of America. We're totally taking back the Panama Canal, and we are going to make it the red, white, and blue land, and it will be totally incredible. The most disturbing part of this whole project is that they wanted alternate trade routes, but they knew that countries, particularly Syria, wanted no part of this. So the proposal, Jen, you're not going to believe this. The proposal was an alternate to the present-day Suez Canal. They were prepared to drop as many as 30 nuclear bombs in order to create an alternate waterway for trade routes that I think was to, the mouth was supposed to go across the Negev Desert. Nuclear holocaust is what they were willing to fuck around with in order to make a few more bucks, because they didn't want to have to deal with countries that were not in favor of the Zionist project.
Yeah, the proposal for using above ground nuclear bombs to build a canal, and it would, by the way, that canal would have terminated just north of Gaza, just a hair north of Gaza. The issue of the Suez Canal is a huge deal, because that's really the connection between Asia and Europe. You can go around Africa, but it's a lot more convenient to go through the Suez Canal. And it was a big deal for the British and French to control the Suez Canal. And they were pissed when Egypt nationalized it. And one of the ways, interestingly enough, that Israel made its bones was what military attacked Egypt after the nationalization of the Suez Canal. It wasn't the Brits. It wasn't the French. It was the Israeli army. And then they got engaged in a battle with the Egyptians. And then, being the good guys they are, the British and French came in and separated them. But that's how that's one of the ways Israel showed, hey guys, we're your agents. We're going to do this for you. And they were rewarded, by the way, with nuclear technology from France for doing that.